First of all, welcome to the channel. Thank you for being here today. My name is Nysarius, and let's get this review started. So, just to give you some information why I'm making this video. For one, it'll be unlisted by the time this video goes live, but I have already made a review of Godfall, right? And at the time, I'd been playing a couple weeks, and I hadn't actually gotten the DLC yet. I'd just simply gotten the Challengers Edition. I played for a couple weeks, and I made my review. And I've been wanting to update the review for a while, and with the Challenger update coming out in just a week as of when I'm recording this, I felt it was a good time to go ahead and do so. And just so you know, I do plan to do a review of the Exalted update itself. So, let's get right into it. So to start the review, I kind of want to take a moment to talk about myself, why you might want to listen to my opinion on the game, and also discuss anything that might bias my opinion of the game. So first of all, I've been playing the game for about 3 months now. Be going on 3 months in just a few days. And over those 3 months, I've accumulated just over 150 hours of playtime, according to the Epic Store. Now, I actually did not pay for the game. I got it for free when it was free on the Epic Store, and I eventually bought the full upgrade version, or the full version upgrade, when it was on sale. So I haven't spent too much money on the game, but I do have a pretty good amount of time invested into the game. So I think that's about all I really need to mention about that. So the first section I wanted to talk about is player experience, and by that I mean both new player and old player alike, right? But I do want to start with the new player experience, particularly if you buy the Challenger Edition. Now, I don't about the deluxe version that comes out with the Exalted update. I don't know how this is going to work, but in the Challenger Edition, you get put straight to end game, right? You start out the game, you go through like one little tutorial mission, and you get boosted right to 50. You get stressed right in the end game with basically no explanation of what to do or how to do it. And I gotta say, it's one of the worst new player experiences I've ever had in a game. It honestly is. The game isn't too forthright with information about mechanics and how stats work and how builds work, and there isn't much available online either, to be honest, that isn't buried in Reddit posts. It's the new player experience of this game is very frustrating, and I do think it's one of the game's biggest faults in its current state, although there are plenty of other ones. And let's start getting into that now, just sort of the more general player experience. Currently, the game has a number of really annoying bugs in it. Things like the quest menu. This game has a quest feature, right? But unfortunately, for some reason, some of your quests will randomly be hidden from you. And this is a bug, right? This is a bug. And basically, you will still be able to complete the quests, but not until you cycle into them, basically. And there are just a number of these really small things. Like sometimes when you're running around, if there's any sort of network hit, your character will sort of do a weird little reset. There are just a number of things that really, like individually, they're not too big of a negative on your experience, but all in all, they do total to be pretty annoying. That said, I do expect a lot of these issues will be getting fixed in the Exalted update. And now getting past sort of bugs, right? In terms of actual gameplay, there are a couple of really annoying things. There are a couple of bosses that have really annoying mechanics that generally only serve to draw out the boss fight. And unfortunately, you know, these boss fights do tend to pop up pretty often in Tower, and it can be really frustrating. You know, certain fights, you know, literally have mechanics that just exist only to draw out the fight. And it wasn't that bad at first, but the more I played, the more annoying it got. And there were certain bosses I kind of wish they would just remove from the game, to be honest. There honestly are. And I mean, I doubt they will, but I will say there is like one specific boss that, as a new player, almost made me uninstall the game just because of how annoying it is. That said, most of these bosses have a way to bypass those mechanics, namely in the form of just outright DPS. If you can kill them faster than they can start their mechanics, then you don't have to deal with them. Obviously, that's not a good solution, though. But I kind of suspect we won't be seeing any of those changed. But player builds are going to be getting a lot stronger, or at least they seem to be getting. Seem like they will be getting a lot stronger in these Exalted update. So again, I doubt these bosses will continue to not be really that big of a deal unless you're playing a build with low DPS. Other than that, the UI really needs some work. It's missing out on a lot of key features, especially the inventory. UI is missing out on a lot of basic feature of filter features. Like, you know, you can sort by like level and rarity and stuff like that. But in a game like this, with as complex as the sort of background mechanics are, not being able to filter out for certain substats and stuff like that in your inventory is very frustrating. And the game definitely needs that feature, desperately so. Unfortunately, the game currently doesn't have such a thing, and I don't know if it'll be getting it. Speaking of features the game doesn't have right now that it probably should, there are no build loadouts for Valor plates. So, you know, you pick your weapons, you pick your augments, but currently, though, a loadout feature doesn't exist. That said, I do believe it is 100% confirmed we're getting loadout slots in the Exalted update, so that's kind of a minor temporary complaint, as it will be getting changed when the Exalted update drops. Now, that's really about all there is to talk about, I think, at least for the specific player experience portion of the video. So let's get into the combat portion of the video. So, the combat, probably the best aspect of the game alongside the build aspect. So, on one hand, it's simple. On the other hand, it does have quite a bit more depth than you think it does. You can play this game's combat very, very simply. You can just mash away, and you can definitely do that. That said, you get the higher levels of bosses will just absolutely roll you if you try to just sit there and mash. And the game's diversity in terms of gameplay mostly comes from yourself, really. It comes from a lot of times your build and how you're playing. For example, the build you see in the gameplay behind you is a dual blade spectral takedown spam build. It's very fun, it's very fast, it's very teleporting, as you've probably noticed. And it plays completely different than, say, a consume build where, you know, you're stacking up element stacks on an enemy, and then you're doing a time attack or a charge attack to consume those stacks to do one big burst of damage. This build is all about just teleporting around, and for bosses, it's literally all this build does for bosses is generate enough overhealth that I can mash through them. At least until I get to high levels, right, where then I have to start actually dodging attacks and stuff. But you know, this is where all your play diversity comes from, because there's honestly not a lot of options. You have your line attacks, you have your heavy attacks, you have timed attacks, and you have weapon techniques, and that's it. And unless you play builds directed around them, you don't have your weapon techniques up particularly often, unless you build for it, right? You know, the build you're seeing in the background is built for weapon technique generation, just so you know. And you know the light attacks, heavy attacks, there's not much combo variation. There's a couple combos. You know, there's like a light, heavy. Every weapon has slightly different combos. But honestly, there's not very much variation there, if we're being honest. There just isn't, right? Most of this game's depth comes from your build and essentially your mastery of fights. Like I said, once you start getting the really high level content, especially in the tower, where you might be stacking up a lot of really dangerous boons, or if you're doing greater curses and Lightbringer, enemies can start being really, really dangerous very, very quickly, right? Especially once you get level 90 and level 100 enemies. And if you have some bad Banes, enemies may just straight up one-shot you, even if you have tons of HP and you have maxed over health. You just simply can't face tank monsters at a certain point, right? So a lot of the mastery of the fight comes from just simply knowing boss attack patterns, knowing when to dodge, knowing when to parry, knowing when you have openings to attack, right? And then most of the depth comes from other mechanics like setting up for getting blessings. For example, my build, the build you're seeing in the background, my pole arm gives me greater blessing of endurance whenever I inflict an ailment with it, which I can do just by simply using a weapon technique. And that gives me I believe it's a 36% damage reduction. This is obviously quite strong. And this is sort of where your diversity comes from. Where do you want to go for pure damage, where you have a swap to say get Blessing of Luck, which increases your crit chance? Or do you say want to swap that gives you crit chance? Or do you say want to swap that's just there for different situations, right? This is where a lot of the combat diversity comes from in this game. It mostly just comes back to your build, right? Which I guess is a criticism, honestly. In terms of the actual combat itself, it's pretty samey. Just if you're just looking at the weapons themselves. But Valor Plates are going to be getting some customization in the Exalted update, so hopefully we'll see bigger variation in combat in the Exalted update. And let's get on to the final portion of the video. So the build diversity is easily the best aspect of the game in my opinion. There are countless types of builds you can make with lots of different ways to go about them. And even just from your weapons alone, there are just an incredible amount of builds you can make. And you can make all of them take you to, through the highest, most difficult content in the game. I don't think there's just about any build where I've not been able to solo 430 with them. As long as I, spent the time to actually make the build as good as I could. That said, it can be a little frustrating with some builds. If you're trying to make more niche, less general builds, but more specific builds, getting specific rolls of specific gear can be really annoying sometimes. Considering the game has no re-roll function of any kind for gear. That is sort of the one biggest inhibitor to build diversity in this game, is the inability to re-roll gear. And especially with how rare, so one aspect of build diversity in this game are the double primary weapons and charms and amulets. So these have two primary effects, right? Two primary effects and two secondary effects instead of the typical one primary effect and three secondary effects. These pieces of equipment can be really, really strong, right? Like for example, I'm still chasing a polearm that it does an air shockwave when you inflict an element, and would also have weapon damage at full HP, right? These two effects together, really, really strong, makes for a very, very overpowered weapon. Haven't gotten one yet, but I would like to get one soon. And while I'm on the topic, we do know they are introducing triple primary weapons in the Exalted update. So this is going to be another layer of, one would call it grind, but I would also say build diversity. They're adding on to the game. And I actually take it back on what the biggest inhibitor of build diversity is. The biggest inhibitor on build diversity is the lack of loadout slots. But as far as I'm aware, we're getting those, so it doesn't matter. Getting back on topic though, as I was talking about before, you can make just about any build you want, and you can make it strong enough to get through any game. There's no lack of build diversity in this game. I honestly spent weeks where basically every day on stream I was making a new build. It was really fun. It's definitely the most fun I have in this game is making new builds, and I'm really looking forward to the Exalted update in that regards. So yeah, if you're worried about build diversity, don't worry. There's tons of builds you can make. Now let's move on to the final section of the video. So in this section, I just kind of wanted to talk about anything I hadn't already discussed, you know, stuff I didn't think kind of warranted a whole section dedicated to it, and you know, stuff like that. Real quick, just want to mention, obviously in terms of just graphics appearance, it's a pretty game. I like how it looks. No real complaints in terms of graphic fidelity. Other than the game is kind of poorly optimized. The game has some optimization issues for sure, and it's really unfortunate. But yeah, game definitely has optimization issues. If you're not on a decent machine, you will definitely see some frame rate drops. That said, it's honestly not too bad. And to get sometimes you need to do some really weird messing with settings to get decent frame rate. And that's why I would say it's poorly optimized. It just doesn't like to run well out of the box, basically. Sound design. Combat sound design is great, right? Probably shouldn't mention this combat section now I think about it. Combat sound design is great. Music is fine. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's there. It's fine. No. Sorry about that. No real complaints about the sound design and the music, right? Except sometimes some of the takedowns do sound a little weak. Some of them sound really nice and crunchy, but sometimes some of the takedowns sound really weak. But not that big of it though. What else is there? This is completely unscripted, by the way. I've just kind of been going this section and just sort of talking about things. I think that's it. I think that's pretty much it. I think that's gonna be it for this review, guys. Yeah, I can't think of anything else to really talk about. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. There will be a review of specifically the Exalted update coming out probably a couple weeks after the Exalted update drops, once I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with what, all the new content, and when I feel like I can make a solid opinion on it. So, but anyways, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for hanging out. I'll catch you guys in the next video.